Hello! So this is part 2 of a series which is trying to answer the question, did the Vikings hate Christians? And in part 1, which you should watch before you watch this one, because I need the views, we get to basically the 9th century and the death of Charlemagne. And up to this point, Charlemagne and Christian missionaries from the Franks and from the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and from the Pope himself down in Italy have been making inroads into Christianizing the Saxons and the various Germanic polytheistic religions that existed in what is now Germany, and they're just starting to encounter the Old Norse mythology that's present in Denmark. So by the time of Charlemagne's death and his sons taking over control of his empire, the Vikings are pretty much a solid presence in Northern Europe. So they're already raiding the coast of Great Britain. There's also a tradition of raiding places like Friesland and the north coast of France. And now that things are starting to get a little bit funky in Frankland, the Franks are a little bit chaotic after the death of Charlemagne, the great Emperor Charlemagne, the Vikings take advantage of this, and we have things like Vikings sailing up the Seine in France and besieging Paris, and then being given a sackload of silver to go away and please not kill everybody. You see them raiding further and further afield in continental Europe, sailing up and down rivers, and by the 860s and 870s, this has been happening so much that Vikings are effectively patrolling the rivers of France. You have people like Rollo, who converts to Christianity in exchange for land. And we discussed in the first video that a lot of people converted to Christianity for pragmatic reasons or cynical reasons, where if you want land and you want power and you want money and you want security, the best way of doing that as a Viking Jarl or as a chieftain or a minor king is to convert to Christianity, so that literally the whole of Christian Europe doesn't have a reason to declare war on you. If you're not Christian, they've basically already got a ready-made casus belli against you. So that's what things like the conversion of Rollo happens, where he's baptized, he converts to Christianity. Within a couple of generations, they are no longer Old Norse Scandinavians, they're becoming Normans. And in another couple of generations after that, they start speaking French and going to church just like everybody else. And by the 1050s and 1060s, they are so Norman that they speak French, have bishops going to war with them, and, are the Bayeux Tapestry people that we've all come to know and love. And it's important when we talk about this situation to remember that none of these cultures are isolated. The Danes are aware of the Franks and the Saxons and the Frisians and the English and the Irish and the Welsh. Everybody is aware of everybody else. Everybody knows that the Pope is in Rome and is the head of the Roman Catholic Church. Everybody knows that Charlemagne has died and his kingdom is being shared amongst his sons. Everybody knows this is happening. And that's very important, because there's this idea that people in Denmark, Vikings in Denmark, were raiding these places that they had never heard of. They had never heard of Ingerland before. Where is this Angleland of which you speak? And so it came as a complete surprise to them that everybody there was Christian and didn't like them. That's complete nonsense. They've been trading with these people for decades. They've been raiding with them for decades. And they've been cynically or pragmatically converting to Christianity, at least paying lip service, for a long enough time that they've been able to actually trade with Christians. Bear in mind, in this period, Christians aren't really supposed to be trading and engaging in mercantile activity with non-Christians. So we've already got all of this stuff happening. We've already got missionaries turning up like Willebrord and Ansgar, coming to Denmark and going to Sweden and trying to convert people. And they make some small inroads, but some of the really big important stuff that happens in terms of Christianization is kings converting. So we're going to do a little bit of back and forth chronologically in this video, just because things happen in different places at different times, but effectively we're going to start in the middle of the 9th century and go into the 10th century and talk about the Great Heathen Army. The Great Heathen Army invades England in 865 and basically spends the next decade kicking the snot out of the Anglo-Saxons until Alfred the Great manages to get his head together and fend them off at the Battle of Edington. And the Great Heathen Army is what they're called by the Anglo-Saxons, the Mikel Heathen here. And that's what the chroniclers call them because they're Scandinavian, right? They're Scandinavians, they've come, they've invaded England, therefore they are horrible heathens and we hate them all. But the reality is probably more likely to have been nuanced. We know from burials at places like Repton that there were Old Norse-style burials amongst what we think are members of the Great Heathen Army, but there's also a suggestion, because of the lack of a lot of grave goods in some of these graves, that many of these people may have been Christian, or at least Christianizing, and it's important when we look at these kinds of burials and the archaeology that surrounds them that we remember that syncretisation was a thing. More on that in a second. I'm very pleased to announce that this video, as many others have been, is sponsored by Nidhogger Mead. Nidhogger Mead is made just outside the beautiful city of York, and it is made with locally sourced natural ingredients. It is a prize-winning mead. It has won international mead competitions. I did a video with Peter and the gang over at their meadery showing you exactly how it's all made. You can see it going from a big barrel of honey into a delicious, magnificently boozy and very, very versatile drink that I highly recommend you get some of. You go to their website, you use this discount code, it will get you money off your order, and it will be helping a great little independent business with really cool people who are reenactors and nerds just like me. They're also helping to organise a 24-hour charity D&D game, which I will be taking part in next month. So check out the description for all the details on that. Get yourself a lovely discount on some lovely mead. Nidhogger Mead is the mead you need. So the Great Heathen Army doesn't just attack. It's not just a raiding force. Yes, they are paid silver, just like the Vikings that raided Paris, by the East Anglians, the Kentish, the Northumbrians. They're all paying weirgild, they're all paying silver in exchange for being left alone. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't work for people like Edmund the Martyr, who's an East Anglian king who engages them in battle and is murked. And it does seem to work a little bit better for people like the Northumbrians, because in York, which is where I live, there is a huge church, there is a minster here, a big cathedral, and it operates throughout this period. Yeah, it's impoverished slightly because the Vikings have been systematically raiding a lot of church sites, but the cathedral, the minster in York, and its precinct seems to just carry on working throughout the period of the Great Heathen Army and beyond. In fact, at one point, during this period, we get the first Christian king of Northumbria, and he is a Viking. He is a Scandinavian. He came over on a boat with a sword and becomes king of Northumbria. Well, king of Deira, king of Jorvik, king of South Northumbria. And we have coins minted by people with crosses on them in this period, with very Scandinavian-sounding names. And it's so important to remember the nuance of the situation. Because yes, there is an enormous army, but it is an army of conquest. This is an army trying to conquer another country effectively and taking advantage of the fractured nature of England. It's a step above the big raiding armies taking advantage of the fractured nature of the Frankish Empire, but where there does it say that they're doing it because they hate Christianity? They like silver is why they're doing it. They really like money, and they also have a huge force, thousands of men who want land, they want security, they want wealth, and they want a place to call their own. And if you are forced into raiding, bear in mind, sea raiding isn't a hobby. You do it because you have to. If you're forced into raiding and you discover you're pretty damn good at it, and there are lots of these places that are undefended or poorly defended church sites in a country that is fragmented, England, it makes sense to try and maybe take a slice of that land for yourself. And we know from the Chronicle, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle says, these people settle their given land in Northumbria by these Vikings, and then they start ploughing the land and supporting themselves. That sounds like settlement to me. And that is exactly what they're doing. They are raiding, they are conquering, but they are then settling. And that's exactly what happens in places like the Isle of Man. So the Isle of Man is an island in the well, it's between Great Britain and Ireland, and it has a very long and established tradition of awareness of its Viking past, and we've got dozens, and I mean dozens and dozens, scores of crosses and runestones, and the Manx runestones are some of the coolest ones that you will find anywhere outside of Scandinavia. Not even just outside of Scandinavia, they're just some of the coolest ones you'll find, they rock. And a lot of the people who were living on the Isle of Man in the 9th and 10th century are Norse-Gaels. So Norse-Gaels are, as the name suggests, a combination of Norse and Gaelic culture, so Scandinavian and insular, Irish and Britain culture. And they mingle together. And this is who is in charge of Dublin in the 9th and 10th centuries. This is who is in charge of the Isle of Man, Limerick, Cork, Waterford, places like that all become Norse-Gael kingdoms and settlements. And eventually they adopt lots and lots and lots of aspects of Irish and insular culture. And on the Isle of Man, one of the big things that they adopt real fast, really unique-like, is Christianity. So we get really cool stuff on the Isle of Man on their crosses and on their runestones, and one of them is figures from Norse mythology on a Christian cross. So we'll take the Heimdall cross. The Heimdall cross is a beautiful cross slab, so it's not like a full cross-shaped carving, it is a slab of stone with a cross carved on it, and at the top of the slab is Heimdall. How do we know he's Heimdall? He's got his big horn, which he uses to call the gods for Ragnarok. And this is a 10th century slab with a Christian cross on it and a Norse mythological figure on it, a Norse god on it. We've also got the cross from Malou, and Malou's cross, which I've seen, you'll have to just kind of take my word for this because the pictures aren't great because it's in a dark church, has beautiful knotwork on one side that kind of looks a bit like a dragon. It has a cross, and it has Sigurd blowing on his fingers after he kills the dragon, after he kills Fafnir and roasts his heart in a fire. So this is a perfect illustration of the syncretization of religion. We've also got this amazing one where we have the figure of Sigurd fighting Fafnir. No, we don't. I'm so sorry. We've got the figure of Odin stabbing his spear into the mouth of Fenrir with one of his ravens on his shoulder, riding Sleipnir into the jaws of Fenrir. And then we've got, I love this, the twin imagery. We've got a priest with a cross and a Bible trampling the serpent. So we've got good triumphing over evil in the form of a Christian priest proselytizing, and we've got the conclusion of Ragnarok. So we've got the two sets of like promises made, if you like, from the two religious traditions, and the interpretations on this are bonkers cuckoo bananas. So there are loads of different ways of looking at these crosses. You can look at them as being somebody who didn't really understand that they were only meant to have one religion. You can look at it like that, like there's an old Norse worshipper who thinks, well, if I can have lots of gods, what's one more? So I'll make a nice cross that's got Heimdall on it and the symbol of this Jesus guy that I'm meant to be worshipping now. You can look at it as a cynical, trying to appeal to both sets of customers thing, or you could see it as something commissioned by a priest. You are a stonemason. What I want you to do is carve both of these sets of mythology onto this cross so that I can teach people that one is very much like the other, and being a Christian is much less effort than being an Old Norse pagan. Great stuff. Here's a shilling. I don't know how much it cost to carve a stone. If anyone knows how much it cost to carve a stone back then, let me know. What it shows is that people were aware of these two traditions at once, and they respected them, at least enough, to make to make art with both of them. So these people are putting a lot of time and a lot of effort into carving these crosses. Somebody probably commissioned this, paid good money for this, and had enough respect and understanding of both of these religious traditions to put them both onto a cross. We have lots of memorial crosses and memorial slabs that have runes on them and then a cross at the top. And nowadays runes are always associated with the Old Norse religion. Nobody really associates runic inscriptions with Christianity. We have the archaeology that says that it happened. We know from the amazing find of the soapstone mould with the crosses and the Thor's hammer that people were making stuff for both. People accepted that they lived together. People were clearly accepting enough to recognise that Christians and heathens were living together. And I really like that. I find that very nuanced. But that's the end of the 9th into the 10th century, and we have things like Harald Bluetooth in the 10th century. He becomes king of Denmark, and he converts to Christianity. He spends lots of money on raising stones, saying that he brought Christianity to Denmark. He didn't bring it to Denmark, but he kind of solidified it in Denmark. And by 960, he's converted to Christianity, but it seems that he was allowing Christian missionaries to preach in Denmark for 20 or 30 years before that happened. His son, Sven Forkbeard, is kind of a complex figure. Traditionally, he's seen as having converted with his father. He has the Holy Roman Emperor as his godfather, and then he's often portrayed as sliding back into his old ways. But a lot of that is because he tried to take the church from the Holy Roman Emperor. He tried to make the Danish church a separate entity from the Roman Catholic Church and the church associated with Otto down there in Germany. He wanted his own church, his own Christianity. And we then have to, if we're talking about Sven Forkbeard, talk about the St. Brice's Day massacre, when on November the 13th, editing Jimmy? 1002, King Ethelred the Unready, King Ethelred Unred, which is actually a play on words because his name, Ethelred, means well advised, and Unred means poorly advised. So he's well advised, the bad advised. It's medieval humour. Orders the massacre of all Danes in his kingdom, and that's not even necessarily a religious thing. It's more a millenarian thing where he perceives this threat. He's like, oh my god, they're out to get me! And he gets, a little bit Howard Hughes and commands all Danish people to be massacred. And we found the bodies of dozens of young Scandinavian men and middle-aged Scandinavian men in Oxford, which actually lines up with Ethelred himself's diary of what happened, where he says that in Oxford, a church was used as a sanctuary by these Danish men. They clearly kind of went, oh crap, they're going to murder us, we need to go into a church, that's where we'll be safe in church. And that in itself shows an understanding of Christianity and the tradition of sanctuary in church, which suggests that these people had, a degree of respect and knowledge for this religion that is everywhere around them at this point. And then the locals, who are basically an angry mob going after these Danish people, burn the church down and murder everybody inside. All of the bodies that we found, all of the skeletons, had wounds on their backs, or they had defensive wounds suggesting that they'd been massacred. They weren't armed, they were unarmed, they were surrendering, and they'd just been murdered. And this results in a massive invasion of England by Sven Forkbeard, the son of Harald Bluetooth, who burns churches. And lots of people go, well, then he burnt churches in England. There you go, he hated Christians. Yeah, but the population of Oxford also burnt churches to get at the fleeing Danish people inside. Dane in this context means Scandinavian, by the way. And it doesn't really work. It's a punitive invasion, it's a punitive attack. The Normans, when they invaded Wales later in the medieval age, destroyed churches and monasteries because it was a slightly different kind of Christianity to the one that they wanted. Or simply because when people invade countries with thousands of big, hairy men who drink mostly beer and have weapons, some of those men are horrible and will try to steal things. Like, the 100 Years' War is littered with noble and royal commanders trying desperately to stop their men from looting and pillaging towns and failing. Sometimes people are just horrible. But I digress into the horribleness of human beings, and away from trying to answer this bleeding question. So, what have we got in the actual Viking Age itself, in these encounters? Well, we've got lots of Vikings going over to Dublin and Ireland and kind of immersing themselves in Irish culture, and a lot of that includes Christianity. Does that mean that some of those Irish Vikings that became part of the Great Heathen Army were actually Catholics from Ireland and just wanted to invade England? Possibly. We don't have evidence for that. I couldn't comment. We have evidence of Christians, good English Christians, burning down a church in Oxford to murder civilians. And we have evidence of people like Harold Bluetooth erecting massive stones to tell people that he brought Christianity to Scandinavia, to Denmark. We know that pre-Christian traditions carry on in Sweden and in Denmark and in Norway for hundreds of years, and that's no different to pre-Christian traditions carrying on in France and in Great Britain and in Ireland for hundreds of years. There is a reason we know about all of the Irish mythology that predates Christianity. It's because it survived, in part. And that's just how it goes. It isn't always because people are violently opposing the other religion. Sometimes it's because life just carries on. Did the Vikings hate the Christians? Some Vikings were probably pretty bummed at some Christians. A lot of Christians were probably PO'd at a lot of Vikings, especially if they've just raided the church down the road. But Old Norse paganism didn't really have that much skin in the hatred game, and as I mentioned in part 1, Christianity and Islam, in this period especially, have this my way or the highway attitude where you're either doing religion like us, or you're doing religion wrong. I've just realised I could probably get a... Nice. So, did the Vikings hate the Christians? Most of them probably not, no. Did the Christians hate the Vikings? Most of them probably not, no. When we talk about these wars and this fighting and all of that stuff, we're probably talking about like 10, 15, 20% of the population most of the time, and a lot of people probably just wanted to farm in peace and weave cloth. Do you know how long it takes to weave enough cloth to make a tunic on a warp-weighted loom? They didn't have time to hate people. Read up on the subject. I've got some reading in the description here that I hope you guys will find interesting. There's some archaeology down there that is fascinating from Repton. And just be cool to each other, just be nice to each other, and tan y tro nesa, till the next time, diolch yn fawr am ymuno. Thank you very much for joining me. Hwyl am y tro. Bye for now. Oh my god, I talked for so long I ran out of space on my memory card.